Hello, and welcome to this episode of TheSquare. I'm Poonam Schallenberger, and I'm here today with Lindsay Wilson, president at Corgan. Welcome, Lindsay.
Well, thanks.
Or maybe I should say welcome back. This is not your first time.
This isn't my first episode.
No.
I'm really excited to be here, though, to talk about my favorite topic, the
office.
workplace.
The workplace, yeah. It's not our first time talking about the workplace, but I wonder, are we still talking about to office or not to office?
I'm not.
Are some people?
You know, that is an interesting question. I joke, but it's an interesting question. And it varies still based on where you are, what part of the country you're in, what's happening in the city that you're in. Although I attribute all those things to just a continuum. I think for the most part, we're not still talking about that. And we're, spoiler alert, definitely not going to be talking about that on this episode today.
That's right.
It's my belief that the office is a tool. I've always believed that. That's not a new thing, right? The office is a tool. And what I think we should be talking about now is what makes a great tool and how can we continue to evolve the workplace, the office building, the neighborhood that surrounds it into really optimal tools.
Yeah, the workplace seems to have this enduring value in our life, in how we connect with each other, how we define our social life, how we define work and what it feels like to work. Whether you consider it your third place or your primary place, it's got a permanent position in the fabric of our life. But it's because it is a tool. It does something for us. Can we unpack what makes a good tool?
I definitely think we can. And I am so intrigued and I think a lot of it is at this point some clickbait on the internet where we're trying to say, why do we even have offices? I agree with you. It's part of the ecosystem of how work gets done. Does everybody's job need to be in an office? Of course not. But when we're talking about knowledge workers, creative workers, team-based work, and we talk about what kind of tools do they need something that meets the need of the job that needs to be done, that has an ease of use, is simple to use, is capable of evolving because what we need changes. So you can think about a good old Swiss Army knife. You know, you need to have a set of tasks that can be accomplished with your tool, if you will, to keep going with the analogy. And we can really start to think of the office like that. And I would even, the next place I would go in this discussion is about ease, because it seems to me that's come back to the forefront.
Yeah, there's these sort of major components that would define a good tool versus a not so good one.
Yes.
And ease seems like the evolution, how quickly it can adapt to meet the needs of the moment and the person using it seem to be some core pillars. Let's start with ease first.
Yeah.
What makes an office easy to use?
So I'm going to cite some of the research that we wanted to talk about today. We just completed the hybrid report between Hugo and the workplace strategy team here at Corgan. So we have data from 1,000 workers that identify themselves as hybrid workers, meaning that they are going into an office, utilizing an office 2 to 3 days a week. So when we asked those 1,000 hybrid workers what were really important drivers to getting them to the office, they said commute time, ease of finding parking, personal desk setup, IT help, and cutting-edge technology. None of these things are new.
Yeah,
None
parking.
of these things
How
are
long
new.
have we been talking about parking?
As long as I've been doing this, way before that.
Or the printer jam, right? The enduring printer jam or some sort of technology.
So this is so interesting to me because the same things that are frustrating and that cause friction in our days before this last evolution of work are still true today. And so if we really, keep going back to this, what makes a great tool, first and foremost, as designers and as workplace strategists, we need to be talking to our customers about how's this going to be a really easy and go to the next step, delightful place for your employees to utilize.
I love that idea of delight because, there's been so much mystery around what do hybrid workers work and how do we get this to work for us? And, we want people to come back or all of that when really it seems quite simple. Give them what they've always wanted that makes their job easier to do. And then once you do that, you can also add this layer of delight. How do you introduce delight?
Introducing delight, well, first you got to tackle the big things. So before you can even get to delight, you have to make the big things easy. So how do your employees get to work? Not that you're going to meet everyone's needs for commute, but is the building location, is the office location one that's fairly easy to access? Is people's journey there, whether it's through public transportation or driving, fairly simple and clear? Get in the front door. Is the security fairly simple and clear and easy? Now we can start talking about creating moments of delight if we've made kind of the basics simple. Think about Disney. Think about the things that they manage to pull off in a place that's really crowded and really busy, but somehow they don't let us get completely beaten down by the waiting in the line part. Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
So then once we've gotten past those big moments, I think creating delight is about surprises. I do think that's something new. So we're talking about things that haven't changed. Something that I think has changed is this awareness in our culture, and it translates into our workplaces, that there needs to be new stuff. That amenities need to change, that this idea of how much we love pop-up art exhibits and pop-up shops, I mean, that's something that needs to be factored into the workplace as well. What that adds is you need another level of intention. That takes a staff member or a team member in an organization to be thinking about that employee experience all the time. So I certainly don't mean to say that things haven't changed. It's interesting to observe what hasn't changed, and then the layers of new things. So talking about delight and creating delight, I think there are some new things and new ideas.
Yeah, that's so that report that of 1,000 people across the country. And I think that's, again, as we think about hybridity and people trying to unpack the mystery around, well, what kind of amenities do they want? And that idea of that something's different, whether it's, hey, this is the day that the coffee truck is here today, or this is the day we all do yoga together. You shared with me a great story about people who get their lunches delivered. And
yes.
I think that was...
We have worked with a company that has an ordering system for lunch every day, but essentially their employees, when they decide to order lunch, it's pretty early in the morning. They're committing that they're going to utilize the office that day, or else they're not going to get lunch because the lunch is getting delivered to the office. But I love that as tying an amenity to also to utilization of the office. The other thing that came to mind as you were talking about yoga classes or the coffee truck is more and more as we're working with our customers really early on in the process before they've selected even an office building or a neighborhood. We're not just evaluating the building, we're evaluating the neighborhood because the neighborhood can meet so many of these needs. I think it can be daunting for an organization to think, oh my gosh, do we have to provide something different for our employees every week? Well, not if your neighborhood is supporting that. If there is a food truck area somewhat adjacent, if there is a lot of boutique fitness that you can partner with those companies to have that opportunity for your employees. So the neighborhood has become a lot more of the conversation.
Yeah. And I think even when we talk about surprise and delight, there's amenities that play a part of it. But survey respondents also said that the aesthetics of the building, like what it looks like, I mean, obviously our office looks so much better than my house, right? But I think even working from home, there's these distractions. Your desk might not be set up with the correct ergonomics and the furniture. How can design, in addition to amenities, surprise and delight?
Well, so if we go back to the report for a second, one of the findings that our workplace strategy team found the most fascinating was under the category of a driver for people to utilize the office was personal desk setup. And under the category of people to drive them or cause them to prefer working from home was personal desk setup. That is fascinating. And because it shows up in both columns, home and work, that tells us something so important. We start out with a project really talking macro. What are the big picture aspirations and expectations for a project? But we can't miss the micro, that the success may actually hinge upon Your personal desk setup. Do you have enough light? Are you able to control the temperature at all? Do you have any control over, how much visual privacy you have? Do you have places to go when you need more auditory privacy or focus? I think there's a real conversation about big picture, selecting the right neighborhood, as I was saying, and then really getting down in the details, which our team does so well in making sure each person has what they need.
Well, it goes back to the idea that the office is a tool, right? And if you're using a tool that doesn't fit you, or maybe is a little loose or doesn't fit your hand size, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be comfortable. And it's not that dissimilar from the office. I think that's also why people preferred to own a desk versus hoteling even.
Yes.
So, Lindsay, we've talked about what makes up a good tool. We talked about ease and that simplicity you need to establish so that you can't even get to the place of surprising and delighting. Let's talk about what makes up a good tool when it comes to how it evolves and it grows with the expectations and needs of today, but then also being prepared for what's to come. How has the office evolved most recently?
So I feel like when we used to talk about evolution and flexibility, it was about furniture. Like, can we rearrange the furniture in this room so then it's flexible? Now I think it's about truly evolving the purpose. So we have to agree that what the office is used for is going to be variable in an organization and over time. And what do I mean by that? So it's used as a team-based tool, it's used for individual work, but it's also used for culture and connection. And how an organization places value on their workplace is dependent on what they're trying to accomplish at any moment in time. So are they in a culture building mode, which would be more attributed to a recruit and retention kind of focus? They may be wanting to use their workplace much more for activities, events, team building, training, all of those things that encourage connection and engagement, and be a little bit less worried about the utilization of their meeting rooms, for example.
Sure. There's a definite sort of response that we saw from the people who were surveyed that, yes, a huge part of the office is to make their job easier to do, to make it easier for them to complete tasks and productivity. But a lot of folks are going to it for that culture, that connection. They're making friends at the office, right?
There's over 70% of our respondents said that was they felt more connected if they saw people collaborating, if they were part of an environment.
Yeah, and we also saw that there was a huge uptick in motivation and productivity when you're surrounded by people who are also working and are part of the process. It makes sense, but the data is very compelling to show that productivity and connection, two definite functions of the office, but also kind of go hand in hand.
Absolutely, and engagement. And we certainly have experienced that in our own workplaces. So it was a hypothesis that we had, and then to see it validated in the research was pretty cool.
So, Lindsay, we're seeing that the role of the office is changing, that the expectation around it is changing. How does that change the way that we measure the success of this tool?
Metrics are so hard, and it's really hard in any industry to change the metrics by which someone measures success. And productivity, efficiency, those are incredibly difficult things to measure. I can tell you that I am tired of this storyline about just headcount in our workplaces, because I don't think that solely can tell a story. Based on what we were just talking about, that can't tell a story about effectiveness. So first, you really have to establish, what are the goals? How do you want to use your tool? And then how are we going to measure that? Is it really about occupancy? Like, is this workplace only successful if 80% of the seats are filled? I don't believe that. And I think that has been so associated with the office. When you think about many things in our world, like schools, K through 12 schools from the get-go have been designed and built to be virtually empty for 2 to 3 months out of the year. We don't factor that into the success of them. But for some reason, our old thinking about the office is that it should be occupied at an extremely high level 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. And I think that's an old metric.
Right. I mean, again, if we keep going back to this idea that the workplace is a tool, and it's not an idea, it's by definition, it's supposed to support the way that we do our work, then it's like any tool, it's not really defined by how often, the success of it at least, isn't defined by how often you pick that tool up, but does it do what it's supposed to do when you want it to do it?
I agree. I'm not advocating for empty office buildings and empty office space. I'm just advocating for what is the measurement of success of the tool in each organization. And then let's talk about it and measure it that way.
So I would imagine that that's what a lot of clients are coming to you now for, saying, this is what we want to accomplish. How do we right size our program or design to meet this goal? If the role of the office is changing and how we define its success is changing, have you seen any sort of changes to the way that you're working with clients and the services you're offering?
I mean, we've had some incredible experiences where we've been part of this discussion from the very beginning. So our work with interstate batteries, our work with Invitation Homes, where when they weren't quite sure, they were still setting their own hybrid policies. We were in there with them, gathering data, having these exact conversations where before we designed a new workspace for them, they were pretty clear on what they wanted to do and engaging their employees in this discussion about what was important to them. And again, ease, not just in our survey, but also in our direct work with clients, ease is at the top of the list.
So, Lindsay, we've talked some about the hybrid report, but lots of information, as you can imagine, from 1,000 survey respondents and interviews from folks like you and other folks in leadership. So there's a great deal of information to unpack. What's your main takeaway from the report?
The hybrid report gives us a little more insight into what's driving hybrid workers, what is driving them to really want to utilize the office. And it is fundamentally how they do work, and it's also cultural and social and what they need to get out of their life, right? So that's super interesting. But we're not just working on projects that are for hybrid workers. We're also working on projects that define the flexible work environment very differently or are very highly utilized, all 5 days of the week. Offices that are for meeting much more than they're for focus work. We definitely see that variety and storytelling and connection are running through all these projects. So at the end of this, a research report is fantastic because it gives us just more insight as we build upon our knowledge base to do the best possible work we can and create the best tools for our clients. So more to come always. That's what's not going to change.
Yeah, I love this topic just because, like you mentioned, the office is such a cultural institution. It's just such a pillar in the way that we work and live and engage with each other. So I'm really excited about this report, and I'm excited about what's to come next.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Always.
It's been great chatting.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of TheSquare. If you'd like to explore the hybrid report, click on the link below, and we'll see you the next time on TheSquare.